Hello and welcome to the second edition of Luck at the Cup, talking to some of the most prominent figures in horse racing here in the United States through the prism of the great event that is the Breeders' Cup, which returns here to Santa Anita this year, 2019. Later in the programme, I'll be joined by broadcaster Christina Blacker and by prominent veterinarian Blea after what's been a challenging year for the industry. But first of all, I'm delighted to say that my special guest in this second edition is a Hall of Fame trainer who has been dominant here in California for the best part of 4 decades. That is at least how long he's been training Grade 1 winners for. All his 9 Breeders' Cup successes have come here at Santa Anita Park. And he remains the holder of perhaps the single most extraordinary Breeders' Cup achievement of all time. 4 winners in one day, including the Classic, on that baking hot afternoon in 2003. He is, of course, the legendary Richard Mandella. Richard, thank you very much for joining me here on Luck at the Cup. And it's a very special moment for me because my first Breeders' Cup was that day in 2003, right here on that baking hot day. I don't suppose at the time you could quite believe what was unfolding, could you?
No, things were happening so fast that didn't have time to take it in until it was all over, and then I took it in real well.
And then you had to keep taking it in over and over again because you probably realised that it was unlikely ever to occur, anything quite as extraordinary as that.
Yeah, thank you. It was a good day.
I remember the first leg quite well. That was half bridled in the juvenile fillies, herself creating a bit of history because Julie Crone was on board. Did you feel the significance of that moment for that reason as well?
I had a lot of horses to run that day and had my job to do. I never thought of Julie Crone anything other than a Hall of Fame rider. Female or male, it didn't matter. She was as good as you could be. And
she'd been very impressive in the lead up to the race, but she had a bad post, if I'm right in remembering.
She did. Post 14, breaking right into the turn. But Julie did a masterful job. Very smooth trip, didn't lose too much ground, and was on a great horse, half bridled.
She was a great horse. The juvenile was rather less expected. Action this day was a huge price. When he won, did you start thinking that the day was taking a slightly odd turn of events?
Again, I just didn't have time to really stop and think like that. I had 3 in that race.
Yeah.
He'd won it, and Minister Eric was second. And Siphonizer didn't run any good that day, but the Action This Day was a better horse than people gave him credit. When he broke his maiden, I said, I hope I get in the Breeders' Cup. This horse is good enough. And we were lucky we got in, and lucky we won.
And just talk me through the race from what you can recall.
Well, Minister Eric was sitting a little off the pace, and I had told David Flores, just let Action This Day come out and settle back nice, make one run. And when they got to the middle of the turn, I remember watching Minister Eric move, thinking, damn, he might win. And then I saw in the corner of my eye, Action This Day kind of swish his tail and drop down and circle the field, and that's all there was.
And he was a massive price and a great win for Bway Hughes, who'd been such a big supporter of the event as well. You're very interesting saying that you couldn't really kind of compute what was going on because you had so much to think about at the time. Is that very much you on a race day, just total focus, not getting too excited either which way?
Yes. Don't ask me who's president on race day. I'm lucky to know anything. I just try to schedule myself out and think that we've crossed the T's and dotted the I's and hope for the best.
And the best was what you got that afternoon. The dead heat after the turf was extraordinary because it lasted so long. You were out there in the heat for nearly half an hour, I think, waiting to see whether Johar had beaten High Chaparral or vice versa. What was going through your mind at that point? Because clearly everyone wants a piece of you then. You've got reporters everywhere, TV cameras everywhere.
Just the stress of waiting to see what happened. To be honest, though, I think I won it, and I think it was so hot it melted the film to where it looked like a dead heat.
There was a lot of conjecture about that afterwards.
There was a lot, yeah. But I'm happy with what I had.
It didn't affect you unduly. You were happy enough to share the spoils. Again, yes. It was a very strong race, a very strong European contingent.
It was a very good group. Johar was that good a horse.
And what were his biggest attributes?
He could run. That was the biggest thing. That horse had a stress fracture in his shoulder in February of that year.
Did he?
And we did a nuclear scan and found it. It wasn't, it wasn't very serious at the time, but it could have been had we gone another step, working or racing, he could have fractured it. As it was a stress fracture, and we gave him a couple of months off. And he's one of the few horses I ever pushed that hard to make something, because I just felt like a 1.5 mile turf was his thing, and again, how grateful that he responded.
And at that point, you've got the 3 under your belt. It's already a history-making day, but you've got a horse who was a serious and legitimate contender for the Breeders' Cup Classic in Pleasantly Perfect, who'd won what was then the Goodwood Breeders' Cup Handicap, now the Awesome again. So he was coming in great form. You knew he loved the track. You were flying. Was there any bit of you at that point thinking, I've used this all up? This can't carry on?
Well, the first thing is it took so long to get the photo. I had to sprint from the racetrack down to the saddling paddock so that I could saddle him. Barely made it there in time. So we got him saddled up, got the rider up. Then I went up to the box to watch the race. And then I thought to myself, I've used up my luck here a little bit. How can this poor guy carry this and win the 4th? And he surely did.
And that was the famous line from Tom Durkin, Mano Mandella, what a day. This was a very, very talented horse, and people talk about the greats of the last 20, 25 years. His name rarely gets a mention. Do you think we forget about him a bit quickly?
Yes, and I've thought about that with several of the horses, all the horses that ran that day. And I think because I'd won 4, I think all the attention maybe went to me, and the horses got diminished a little bit. And that's probably why.
That's interesting. I mean, do you almost feel a bit guilty about that?
I don't feel guilty, no.
I was going to say.
No, I can live with it. Yeah. But seriously, think about it. Winning 4 races on the day, the spotlight came on me instead of each of the horses, and they deserve better. I speak up for them whenever I can.
Which of them were you most proud of on the day?
Pleasantly Perfect. He had a virus that affected his heart as a 2-year-old and 3-year-old, and we tried training him and we couldn't. He'd get exhausted just from a short gallop. So we put him out, and my veterinarian, Rick Arthur, told me, he said, he'll get better with time. And I looked at him, and that didn't add up that well to me, but I did what I was told and gave him time, and it took a lot of time. And we had no idea if he could run or not for a year, until he got a year later and then started to work him, and then, wow, what a horse this is.
Was it always destiny that you were going to do this job then?
Yes. Well, when I was younger, I was going to be a jockey, but I outgrew that. Had to go to Plan B. The idea was I'd be a jockey and then a trainer, and we had to cut the jockey part out.
Were you enjoyed riding when you were young?
Yeah, I loved it. Yeah.
And your father was a farrier.
My father was
right?
a blacksmith,
Yeah.
and had a ranch where we bred a few horses and trained all kinds of horses: quarter horses, thoroughbreds, roping horses if they couldn't run, to sell them as a using horse. And so it was a lot of different experience.
Did you naturally feel an affinity with the animal? Was that part of your makeup?
I tended to always get along a little better with the horses than the people.
Were you quite a shy child?
Oh, very shy, yes. I don't think I'd say shy, no. But I enjoyed working with horses, and I did it before school, after school, in the summer, in between school, or to replace school. So it's something I always enjoyed doing, and working several different jobs moved my career forward at a young age.
But you were someone who, all joking apart, all slowness apart, you were someone who was happy to bide your time. When you got a good horse in your care, you were happy to take your time with that horse, and not in too much of a rush to get them to the track.
Well, looking back on my experience, my father had that ranch that I told you, and we would get horses that were injured severely to try to rest and rehab and get back to the races. And that was a very good lesson, is to learn, don't hurt them too bad. When you have an injury, stop early. Don't go another time and make it worse to the point you can never get them back. And so I would say that my early lessons of doing that, I had the examples in front of me that taught me don't push too far.
And to be consistent in what you do in terms of trying to adopt similar principles with all horses?
Horses have always been like people to me. Take one at a time and do the best I can for each one. I don't think I've ever had too much of a system that I try to put them through. I just bring them along as they go.
Before you had your amazing day at the Breeders' Cup, you'd already trained Breeders' Cup winners and Kotashan and others in '93. You'd also had that extraordinary period in the mid-'90s where you plundered South America for amazingly talented horses and had the 1, 2, 3 in the Santa Anita handicap with Siphon, Sandpit and Gentleman. I think I've got it in the right order. Have I got it in the right order?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Of those three, legendary horses at the time, which was the best, do you think?
Gentleman on his day was the best. Siphon was very consistent. Gentleman, he was consistent most of the time, but every once in a while he'd throw in a clunker. But on talent, Gentleman was the better horse. Sandpit was a turf horse that we tried, I think, at 9 on the dirt. And it turned out pretty good. I probably should have done it when he was 5 or 6 or 7.
And there was a sort of vintage era of the older horse and people realizing you could keep horses going and they'd keep delivering for you. How important do you think that is, that sort of people give horses a chance to show what they're really capable of and to flourish as 5, 6, 7-year-olds?
I think it's a missed opportunity in racing that people think that they have to have something out of them at 2 and 3 because so many horses get to their best at 5, 6, and 7. You know, the cowboys that made their living on a horse, they didn't want a 2 or 3-year-old. They wanted a 5, 6-year-old that had gone through the silliness and the baby stuff and had grown up, and that was their choice of their best horse to use all day long.
And if you can keep a horse sound, when do you believe that horse is at its absolute physical peak?
I would say that 5, 6,
yeah.
7. 7's been a big year for me. I don't know why.
It's perhaps only here that horses really do race that long. I mean, in Europe, it's very unusual to see a 7-year-old going and doing well, and similarly in the Far East, it does seem that here people will take their time and allow these horses to race.
Saying that, it doesn't make sense because in Europe you have to shut down part of the year, so that should prolong them.
I know.
I never thought about it before until you said it, but
then I suppose we always think about stud careers as well, and people.
Well, that definitely gets in the way. If they're valuable enough, they're going to go to stud, or a mare with some credentials is going to be bred, because you have to weigh the cost of insurance if you want to insure them to race, as opposed to what they could make if they went to the breeding end of the game. And so there's always a lot of things you've got to balance out and figure out.
Talking of mares, you've trained one of the best mares of the modern era in Beholder. And the race that she won here in 2016 when she beat Songbird, I think many people would put that in their top 3 or 4 Breeders' Cup races of all time. How much satisfaction did it give you to get her back to win another Breeders' Cup race after the disappointment of not running at Keeneland in 2015?
Yeah, everything. But to the second part of your question, she never owed us anything. So when we didn't make Keeneland, that's just crossed off of the calendar. I don't go away thinking I need to get back at that or anything else. If that mare had never done anything again, how great was she? But that race, Breeders' Cup or any race, hard to come up with one more exciting than that.
In terms of your own personal experience and races you've watched and looked back on and been involved with, where does that single race stand for you?
On top. Where do you think it would be?
Right on top.
Surely.
Total career highlight.
It is. I'd have to go back and say the Pacific Classic that she won was just devastating. Gary Stevens is standing up, galloping into the 3/8 pole, and he didn't say a word. She just took off and circled the field and opened up on the colts the first time she'd ever tried it, and just won going away. So that's pretty good. You're asking me to do too difficult a task. I've got a lot of cherished memories in the sport, and trying to pick one would be too hard.
But obviously your affection for her as an athlete and as a horse must be very difficult to beat.
It is, yes. You know, she's a mare. She's around for a long time. It's like having a daughter.
As far as personal ambition is concerned, do you have any ambitions that remain, or have you achieved as a racehorse trainer everything you want to achieve?
When I was in the 6th grade, I think it was, a teacher asked us kids to write down a goal in life. And I think I wrote down that I was going to win the Derby by the time I'm 30. And I've lapped that already. And I would say honestly at this stage, it frustrated me a long time, although I never changed how I did things. I trained my horses the way I do. At this stage of my life, I'm very happy with what I've done. It's much more than I ever dreamed of. I wasn't the person that sat and dreamed of winning Breeders' Cups or Grade 1 races. When I was young, I was just begging the big man if I could have a barn full of those M webbings that are in my shed row and some horses behind it that could make a living. So I've gone way past that.
I know you're going to stay with us for the rest of the show, but for the moment, Richard Mandella, thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome. It's been my pleasure.
Hall of Fame trainer Richard Mandella. And when you rejoin us after this break, Richard and I will be joined by the illustrious broadcaster Christina Blacker. Welcome back. You're watching Luck at the Cup. I'm delighted to say that Hall of Famer Richard Mandella is still with me, and we are joined by one of the most prominent horse racing broadcasters in this country, who will be a big part of the TVG and Players Show teams for this year's Breeders' Cup, Christina Blacker. Christina, great to see you.
It is good to see you, and I'm really looking forward to Breeders' Cup this year because, as you say, we at TVG get to be a big part of it this year, and now that it's at home for us, all the bells and whistles that TVG has to offer, we'll be able to bring all our resources here.
Yes, I sense amongst the TVG team that there's going to be a sort of outpouring of frustration from years of not being involved in the event.
That's true. You will not miss us. We will be here on the ground from day one. We'll be doing a work show that will sort of be similar to the breakfast show that you're very accustomed to over the last few years, and just all boots on the ground, basically, for us for this year.
Now, the man on your left has been a big part of your life as a broadcaster, really, for the last 10, 15 years, essentially.
Well, he has, and actually, I mean, just a big part of my life in general. My now husband was his assistant, and I think it's very safe to say that if Dan hadn't come to work for you, I never would have met him. So, I mean, everything. My wonderful children at home, thank you for hiring him, because I would have had a very different life if it wasn't for that placement.
You've got a bit more than you bargained for today, sort of gratitude for all sorts of different reasons. On a serious point though, Richard, how much pride do you take in the people that you've trained as well as the horses that you've trained?
Great pride and great pleasure in seeing them have their successes.
Well, and Dan will tell you, you know, he had the fortune of being a member of the Darley Flying Start course and learned from different folks all over the world during that time and his time in Europe when he was in college. And he'll tell anyone that listens, this is the man that taught him the most about horses, that he wouldn't trade that 2 years and wouldn't have been able to make up for the lessons he learned in that time had he gone another 10 years as an assistant for someone else. So
I would ask you naturally what it was that you were imparting to all these people, but I suggest that you're probably a bit too modest to tell me what it was, or can't put your finger on it. Or can you?
When I make my salad, I like a little bit of olive oil, apple cider vinegar, a touch of honey, salt and pepper.
There we are. You see, it's all in the making. It's all in the execution. But it's clearly working extremely well. How's Dan's cooking coming along? Okay.
Very good. Dan is a
Excellent.
brilliant chef. I guess I owe you that as well.
I didn't know he never cooked for me.
Now you've got a lot of special memories of Beholder. Because she is the sort of most recent superstar, if you like, from the Mandella Academy.
I do. I have some wonderful memories, but just listening to you kind of touch on the Pacific Classic, the year that she won, I had a very unique perspective that year. Normally I would be broadcasting, I would be down sort of standing watching from the front side or the winner's circle somewhere else, but I was on maternity leave that summer, and so I was at the races as a fan. And I was actually sitting 3 boxes above you and Randy and your daughter as you were all watching the race. And as she made that move that you mentioned where she just overtook the field in a second, everybody stood up and the entire grandstand was roaring and applauding for her, and you froze. And it was as if you just took this big breath and took in what she was doing and kind of soaked up the emotion of that moment, because everyone else couldn't stop jumping and yelling and cheering. And I think you were sort of, from my perspective, just paralyzed in awe watching her and what she did. And I got very emotional watching it because I could just see how proud you were in that moment. And it is forever one of my favorite races I've ever seen, not only watching what she was able to do, but just the human connection and what it means to the people that are closest to them.
And that's something that you've touched upon before Beholder. You've talked and written about the human connection with the horse and the way that people can connect with the animal, which some of us can't empathize with, but some people, as you've said, have that within them. What does it...
Not as dramatic as the female side here. Very touching. But I'm not emotional like that, so I just do my job.
I'm not sure I believe you. Do you believe him?
No, I saw the emotion.
And it's one of the reasons why you've come to chat to me today is because you've been one of the pioneers in the I Am Horse Racing movement, which is essentially trying to showcase that to the wider public, the way that people within the industry respond to horses and the way that they look after the horse.
It is. I think that that's something that has been lost and that we haven't really had the opportunity to tell those stories. You know, you think about one racehorse, one career, even just one race, and how many people are involved, from the farm to the people that break those horses, the first one that gets on their back, then they go through a sale, then they come into a trainer's barn, the exercise rider, the groom, the hot walker, all these different people that have had a hand physically on the horse, and then this emotional investment in their success. They are all together when those horses are competing, win, lose, or draw. And we got together and for a lot of reasons felt like those stories weren't being told, and we wanted to have the opportunity to do that. And we've been very fortunate in that everyone's been so receptive. The industry, I think, was sort of crying out for these sort of heartwarming stories to be shared. And from all areas of the globe, we've had people that are interested in telling their story and sharing. That's the brilliant thing about social media. We can go and film them, but they can also jump on the movement themselves with the hashtag on social media, on Twitter, and tell us why they love this game.
And we can appreciate people who perhaps wouldn't have had that exposure beforehand.
Right.
You know, all the people involved, as
Exactly.
you were saying.
A few weeks ago, I was at the Keeneland September yearling sale, and all the horses look great. We were there for book one, and there was this one particular Warfront colt, and I watched this handler, and her name is Belinda, and she was so in love with this colt, and every time he came out to show, she was the one to show him, and every time the sort of heavy hitters were looking at him and watching him walk and studying his conformation, I could see that she was proud, but also it was bittersweet because she knew in a couple days he was going to be taken away. He was going to be purchased and he was going somewhere else. And she will always root for him and always have that investment. But as he was in the ring, and he ended up selling for $2.9 million. And it was the most bittersweet reaction to watch because she was so happy, but also there he went. Her little bird, he was going to go fly and do something. And it was real fortunate to feel that moment. And I wanted other people to feel it too. And so that happened to be the person that we shared the story of in that particular week. But those moments happen every day at the racetrack. You just have to be watching.
And this all came out of the difficult events that befell Santa Anita at the beginning of 2019, or the back of 2018, at the beginning of 2019, and this racetrack in the public spotlight. But it is fantastic to see the way people have joined forces to reinforce that positive message.
I think you're right. And I think for a lot of different reasons, you know, we want it to be a place of education. We've started to kind of broaden our content a little bit. We're going to go to UC Davis and talk about some of the medical challenges that face racehorses. We'd like to be sort of a database of information so that when things do go wrong, if you want to know what is laminitis, what happens when a horse colics, we have a video, we have something that you can reference to really understand it. And we'd like to be that place that not only the horse racing folks can go, but also the general news media if they have questions. Because I had a couple personal, just frustrating experiences where I felt like the voice of our industry to the general public was very misguided, and not ill-intentioned, but just folks that didn't know what they were talking about. And so if we had some place where they can get all the information they need, then hopefully our story is shared accurately. And at that point, make your own judgment, but please have the truth and the facts before you do make your own call.
So essentially it's about the sport being out there on the front foot rather than waiting for something to happen and saying, oh, we're not sure what we're doing.
Right, exactly. And just educating and being, like I said, a database and a place where people can come together if they want to share their stories or just show their support in one place. We'd like to have all of those folks, you know, as a petition type, signed up on I Am Horse Racing, so we know who's behind us.
Richard, you're nodding away there. I'm sure you're agreeing pretty much with everything.
I'm listening, just thinking how well said it. She's done it.
And to see the combined endeavour as well from so many people within the sport must be very encouraging for you, who's been part of this place for so long.
It is. I think most people do recognize it, but racing industry needs to recognize how serious this has been. And we've got to get ourselves onto the right road, be aggressive, be proactive, not sit back and catch the foul balls.
Right.
Need to hit them.
Well, and don't you think I think, proven over the last couple of weeks, and especially, you know, coming off a great successful Del Mar meet, that when everybody is working together and everybody is on the same page and everybody does have the same priority at the top, which is safety, we can accomplish it. It's just a matter of having every single person signed on board to the exact same goals.
And I was talking in yesterday's episode with Carla Gaines and Peter Urton and Mike Smith, and saying that you do get struck when you come in as an outsider to California by how tight that California racing fraternity is. And it's not a myth. People are very close and they're passionate about these great places, and it's important that we preserve a place like Santa Anita Park.
I think they are. I think it's wherever you go in horse racing, I think it's a family. I think it really is. And they're closer in your own sort of jurisdiction, of course, California and New York and Florida, but also as you travel, as you meet each other, as you compete against each other, it's amazing how friendly the rivals can be and how they can help each other out, you know, coast to coast. And we've been lucky actually with I Am Horse Racing, as I'm saying, that we've gone to New York and had people come, I want to tell my story, I want to share. We've been able to film in New York, we've been able to film in Kentucky, we've been able to film in England. I mean, everywhere we've gone, people have been wanting to be a part of this and to be connected.
Is there anything that you've done through your career, and it's been a long and distinguished career, is there anything you've done in your career that's been quite as fulfilling as this?
That's a good question. I don't think so, because I've had such an outpouring of support from people that I didn't even know. And I say I, but I should say we, the entire team. We've had so many people come to us and just be proud of it. And we've had some real generous support from sponsorship, because this was just a group of friends that came together and wanted to help. We didn't have any money. We didn't have any resources. We sat at my dining room table at 9:30 in the morning thinking we'd be there for an hour or two. At 4:30 in the evening, we had a logo, we had a mission statement, we had all these grandiose plans, but no money to make it happen. And then we've had this amazing support from the farms, from some of the stallions in particular, from the racetracks, from the Breeders' Cup, that want this to keep going and to keep kind of the ball and the momentum rolling.
I was going to say the Breeders' Cup have shelved in right behind this.
They have.
And very significant that the event is taking place here at Santa Anita this year, when they could quite easily have said, no, we're not doing that.
And I think that was very important. It was very important for the industry as a whole. I think the support of the Breeders' Cup for Santa Anita and for California was something that we absolutely needed in that time. I think it could have been crushing if it had been taken away from here.
And Richard, as someone who's been involved in the industry here in California for so long and has had so much success at the top level, can you still impart a degree of optimism to younger people coming into the game?
Yes, this will pass. It's going to go through some rough times, I think, and slowly work our way out of this. I don't think it'll happen fast, but you know, we need to get better things on television than news about injuries or the things that we're missing here at the racetrack. We need to get positive statements out there.
Well, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. When you rejoin us after this break, I will be joined by the Racing Committee Chair of the Association of American Equine Practitioners, Dr. Jeff Blea. Welcome back. You're watching Luck at the Cup. Delighted to still be joined by Hall of Fame trainer Richard Mandella, all of whose 9 Breeders' Cup victories, including those 4 in 2003, have come here at Santa Anita, where we're broadcasting to you from today as part of this 5-part series. My final guest, my third and final guest, is a man who has been an integral part of the veterinary firmament here in California for a number of years. He's a past president of the American Association of Equine Practitioners. He is now the chair of their racing committee. He will be a big part of what goes on during Breeders' Cup week, and also part of the On Call program, which was the program designed many years ago to try and inform the public better, particularly when it comes to network broadcast of big events. He is Dr. Jeff Blea. Dr. Blea, great to have you with us.
Nick, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I don't think I'm overstating the importance of the veterinary role, particularly this year. It's a frenetic week for your team.
It's a busy week for all the veterinarians on the backside, and there's an entire comprehensive program put together with the veterinarians to handle everything the entire week, including both Friday and Saturday. So it's a very intense 2 days.
And you have horses traveling from all over the country. There are protocols to be observed. Just tell me how you sort of help the horsemen, if you like.
Well, they'll be traveling from all over the country, number one, but more importantly, they'll be traveling from all over the globe. So that Friday, Saturday, we'll probably get our first shipment of horses from Europe, and we'll get another shipment in on Monday from Europe as well. And then most of what we call the domestic horses will ship in during that week. Horses that are shipping in usually will require fluids, where you give them IV fluids or oral fluids. Just like you, when you travel, you get dehydrated. If you've been on a plane too long, you sit there too long, you go through too many airports, you get dehydrated. We'll get them when they arrive here. We'll give them fluids. It automatically gets them back on their feet, and they're ready to start training and preparing for the weekend.
And is that as a matter of course, is it? You find that that's the same with pretty well every horse that steps off a plane?
I don't know if it's for every horse, but I know the horses that we get in our practice, it's standard protocol. And over the years, we've learned that as these horses ship in, wherever they're coming from, whether it's Kentucky or Ireland, getting those fluids into them the first 24 hours is critical. It gets them back on their feet, reduces chance of illness, especially respiratory illness, and they're able to train forwardly and run really, really well.
And in essence, I guess, if I was traveling a horse from a long way or overseas, I want the reassurance of knowing you're there for me if I need you.
Right.
The likelihood is I won't need you too much, but if I do, I want that reassurance in a foreign place or a different place that there's people with real expertise ready to look after these horses.
We're like priests. You hope you don't need us.
Exactly.
So, but what happened? There's a lot of work that goes into preparing for this weekend, and it begins weeks, if not months, in advance. With, you have to look at protocols as far as ship-in requirements, vaccination requirements, medication requirements, what are withdrawal times, things like that. So there'll be a lot of phone calls and conversations that occur, horses that are shipping in. That's one thing about the veterinary community that's unique, is a lot of these horses that ship in are clients that we've taken care of over the years, but more importantly, their veterinarians are friends of mine and people in my practice. So there's a lot of sharing of information between practitioners here and abroad to make sure that everything is done well and done right.
And as far as the Breeders' Cup's concerned and some of the other big races that are televised nationally, I've always been struck since I've been working here how the veterinarians are ready and willing to come on and be the public face and answer questions and answer quite direct questions. If any unfortunate incident should happen to befall any horses, or if there's an injury, that you're right there on the front foot. Now, that's not an accident, is it? This is part of
that's a design.
Distinct strategy.
Yes, and there's two parts to that. The first part is at Breeders' Cup here at Santa Anita, the veterinarians we participate in a program on the backside, so there's protocols in place if there is an emergency or any sort of problem. The Southern California Equine Hospital, they're staffed and ready to go. We have boarded surgeons in place, boarded anesthesiologists in place. I actually run as a conduit between the hospital and the veterinarians on the racetrack in case there are any problems. There are protocols set in place to quickly and efficiently tend to a horse that's in need. That's the one part. The second part is what we call the on-call program, which we participate in through AAEP. That program started after Ruffian broke down, and there was no real good way to disseminate information to the public. So AAEP put together this program of on-call veterinarians. There's probably 30 of us around the country and around the world that are media trained to support television broadcasts. So if there is any sort of injury or any sort of event involving the health of a horse, we're there to provide information to the public in an educational, concise format that they can understand.
And has it worked in the way that you wanted it to work?
It has, but I think it can go another level.
Go on,
I think
tell
it can
me.
go to another level. For example, for Breeders' Cup, I'll be on the backside, basically relaying information from the backside if there's a problem to the on-call vets, Dr. Palmer and, I'm forgetting his name.
Some other guy.
Yeah, I can pick Alan. I can pick. So one will be in the media room, one will be on the camera, with the camera. I think there's a better way to educate the public. And, you know, I think we have a really good story to tell from the veterinarian's perspective and from the Southern California Equine Foundation's perspective. We're a progressive group of people. I think the on-call program needs to go to the next level and provide educational materials to the public. Why do we do what we do? For example, why do horses get tested after a race? How do horses get evaluated before a race to make sure they're safe? What type of diagnostics are employed to make sure those horses are healthy and safe? What type of conversations or interactions occur between the trainer and the veterinarian? For example, you know, Richard and I were constantly going over horses. He may see something that I don't, I may see something that he doesn't. And I think those conversations, they become mute to the public, but they're critically important that the public understands exactly what goes on back here, because there's a lot of good stories to tell.
Isn't it all about opening up the sport fundamentally?
I think the sport's pretty transparent already.
You do?
I do. I think from a veterinarian's perspective, I think we're very transparent. And I think the more transparent we can be, I think the better the public will accept what we're doing. You know, any profession has what we call a social operating license. And it's a way to operate in the public's eye, whether you're trusted or not. And I think veterinarians, by and large, still are, and will continue to be trusted by the public, but we can't take that for granted. And in order to continue to develop that social operating license, we have to be transparent. We have to be open. We have to let the public realize that we, just like the horsemen, are here because of the horse. And the horse is what comes first. And that's what the public needs to be made aware of.
What gives you the most amount of job satisfaction?
Seeing a horse do really, really well. You can, you know, in my day, in my routine, I look at a lot of horses, and when I see a horse doing really, really well, that's what I enjoy the most. Coat blossoms, he's training well, trainer's happy with his work. He'll come back and he'll say, man, he worked really well. I'll talk to the rider said, God, he worked really well. I'll watch the horse jog, look at the horse, and he looks terrific. And he'll go into that race, and you just know he's right. And that's probably the most satisfying thing for me.
Now, Richard said he was only sitting on this couch because he was going to make sure you were telling the truth to me about everything. So how's he doing so far?
50-50.
Now, your relationship goes back how long?
I don't know.
He's worried I'll hit him with my left hand.
How long?
I think
15 years?
yeah,
20 years?
Probably close to 15
Probably.
as a primary.
And how crucial is that relationship between trainer and veterinarian for you?
I'd like to make a joke, but it's a serious question, deserves a good answer. You can't have too good of a relationship between a trainer and a veterinarian and an owner. Mm-hmm. If you can't say what you need to say and look your problems direct in the eye, you shouldn't be in this business. And I'm very fortunate to have a man that I can speak straight to. The people I train for know that we have that confidence, and I believe they have that confidence in me, so there's never anything held back. You face your problems head on.
So you can engage with each other entirely honestly.
Absolutely. And that's the one thing about Richard, and that's kind of how I try to design my practices. I will tell you what I think, and I want you to tell me what you think. And we may not always agree, but we always do what's best. And it's an equilateral triangle between owner, trainer, and veterinarian. And everybody has to be working together. And I don't deal with the owners with Richard's barn because he knows how to deal with those owners. But if I see something that Richard hasn't seen, I let him know and he deals with it. And it's a pleasure to be able to do that because what needs to be done will get done.
It's best practice all
Absolutely.
the way. There are many different ways you can go into veterinary medicine. And
Correct.
if you want to look after horses, there's many different fields that you can go into as well. What is it about the racetrack that attracted you in the first place?
I grew up on the racetrack. I grew up with my dad in New Orleans and walking hots and cleaning stalls and walking hots and cleaning stalls on weekends in the summer. And I've always loved it just because, everybody likes the horse, okay? And, there's different disciplines. You can get into performance horses, you can get into working cow horses, you can get into endurance horses, but the athlete, especially the thoroughbred athlete, there's something unique about that horse. And watching them as they come on as 2-year-olds and develop and get trained, and that athleticism is just something that I admire and enjoy. And it's like watching a really good hitter at the plate, and they have the right technique and the right skills. Watching that horse put everything together and at the right time and go out and win a race with everything that goes into it, that's what's really enjoyable.
Is there a track memory or a Breeders' Cup memory in particular that stands out for you, something you've maybe played a small part in?
Oh, there's been a lot of them. I try to stay in the background, but one thing I enjoyed, I think a Breeders' Cup moment that I thought was pretty special was the distaff when Beholder and Songbird came down to the wire.
That race has got a lot of love today. It's not a surprise. I think it deserves a lot of
Yeah,
love.
it was pretty special because our practice took care of Beholder, and our practice also took care of Songbird. And I was intimately involved with Beholder, so we won. And that was pretty special to me. And she knew she won.
And just seeing two
Just watching that race.
fillies and mares giving it
Yeah.
the lot.
That was pretty special.
Well, thank you very much for coming and
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it, Nick.
chatting to us. I really appreciate it, Jeff, and it's been a great insight. And fingers crossed this, which is such an important year for Breeders' Cup and an important year for Santa Anita, goes the way that you particularly want it to.
Well, every year is important, and there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to make sure that it is a safe and popular event.
Richard, thank you very much. I thoroughly appreciate your time, and best of luck for this year, however it shakes down. And most importantly, I hope you get that Kentucky Derby, even if it means going around another lap. You could have lapped it twice by then.
I could go a second lap.
But I suspect you'll still be. Going a second lap and having a go. Dr. Jeff Blea and Richard Mandella, who've been my guests this episode, and my thanks to Christina Blacker, who spoke so well about I Am Horse Racing earlier on. And do look out for those messages during the course of Breeders' Cup Week. And Christina will be part of that TVG team, and the players team will be bringing you coverage in addition to the NBC coverage during the course of Breeders' Cup Friday and Saturday. My next episode is also coming from here at Santa Anita, when I will be joined by a man who's seeking his first Breeders' Cup winner as a trainer, Simon Callahan. He'll be joined by the new Supremo here, or relatively new Supremo here at Santa Anita, Aidan Butler, and Derek Lawson, jockey's agent to Flavian Pratton. Who knows, he could be riding a winner of the Breeders' Cup Classic as well. So that's to look forward to. But from Richard and from Jeff and from Christina and from me, thank you very much for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.